You know all about the Spitfire and the Mustang, but what about the fighter planes that pilots actually prayed not to fly? Today, I'm counting down 6 of the worst and sometimes flat-out ridiculous fighter planes to ever see combat. World War II saw both sides push the limits of technology, and sometimes that led to projects that now feel completely absurd. The British had the Panjandrum, a rocket-powered set of wheels designed to roll up the beach during landings. Basically a giant spinning accident waiting to happen. Not surprisingly, it never saw real combat. On the German side, the race for new weapons brought out the 349 Natter. By March 1945, Germany was desperate for anything that could change the tide, and the Natter looked more like a rocket than any fighter plane. The plan was simple on paper. Launch the Natter vertically, get it up to the bombers as fast as possible, fire off everything on board, then the pilot bails out and parachutes home. That was the theory. In reality, the first manned test ended in disaster. The aircraft, built partly out of plywood, launched straight up but quickly spun out of control. Investigators believe the pilot may have blacked out when the cockpit flap smacked him during launch. The Natter slammed into the ground, killing the pilot and ending the project right there. Another bold experiment that proved too risky and too late for the war. Aviation changed fast in the years before World War II. Everybody wanted to move past the old biplanes, those stacked wing relics, and bring in faster, tougher fighters. In the U.S., a company called Brewster got the job of coming up with something new for the Navy back in 1935. What they delivered was the F-2A Buffalo. It had some weight to it, never a great thing for a fighter, and pilots soon found it slow and awkward to handle. The Navy didn't order many, and most Buffaloes went overseas to Finland, where the Finnish Air Force actually used them against the Soviets. History books usually chalk that up to the poor Soviet training, not the brilliance of the plane itself. The pace of air combat changed constantly. New technology kept coming, and the Buffalo kept falling behind. The Allies tried to fix it with modifications, but every fix added more weight. By the time it hit the front lines, it was even slower, and now the engine liked to overheat as well. Against the Luftwaffe, it just couldn't keep up. When it went up against Japanese fighters, the Buffalo was completely outclassed. For a while, people blamed the pilots. Today, most agree it was just a bad design, an aircraft that simply could not keep up with the demands of a brutal new kind of war. During the Battle of Britain in 1940, the skies over southern England became a proving ground for some of the most skilled pilots and advanced aircraft of World War II. Fewer than 3,000 British fighter pilots took to the air, betting their lives on their flying and technical ability. This group faced off against the best of the German Luftwaffe, and through sheer grit and tactics, forced Hitler to put his invasion plans on ice. Most people know about the Spitfire and the Hurricane. Those get all the glory. But not every plane the Royal Air Force sent up was a winner. The Bolt-and-Paul Defiant is a perfect example. At first, it looked like a solid idea, a fighter that looked a bit like a Hurricane, but with a gun turret on the back. Pilots caught a lot of enemy fighters off guard that way with the rear-facing guns. Early on, it even worked. German pilots chased Defiants, got a face full of turret fire, and paid the price. Problem was, the Luftwaffe quickly figured out the trick. The Defiant had zero defense from head-on attacks or anything coming from underneath. Once the German pilots adapted, Defiants started going down in bunches in daylight combat. The gunners usually had no way out if things went bad in the air. The Royal Air Force shifted the Defiant to night fighting roles and sea rescue, but by then its time in the spotlight was over. In 1938, Curtiss Wright put the CW-21 Demon in the air, hoping to change the game for Allied air forces. The designers went all in on making the lightest fighter possible, using just enough metal to keep it fast and agile. The idea was to make something that could climb, dive, and dogfight on a budget. Because it was so cheap to build, the Demon ended up shipped off to the Chinese Air Force, where it joined battles in the Pacific against Japan, and it also served with the Dutch East Indies. But cutting weight came at a price. The Demon had almost no armor around the cockpit. That meant pilots flying it often ended up injured, or worse, if they took a hit. The fuel tanks were another weak spot. One burst of enemy fire could turn the whole plane into an instant fireball. Even with its early potential, the Demon never managed to find its place in the war, and only 62 were ever built. Its story is mostly a reminder that the gamble on speed and agility sometimes came with too much risk. The Falco stands out as one of the strangest choices of World War II. Italy introduced it in 1939, right as the era of biplanes ended, and nobody really expected anyone to use biplanes in heavy combat again. But the Royal Italian Air Force did just that. Pilots actually liked flying the Falco. It felt light, quick to turn, thanks to its short lower wings. The Falco even made it into the last months of the Battle of Britain. Mussolini sent hundreds over to fight with Germany's Luftwaffe, aiming to prove that Italy could compete in the air. The reality looked very different. On paper, the Falco could outmaneuver British Spitfires and Hurricanes, at least for a few moments. But that only went so far. It simply did not match the new generation of monoplanes. The Falco had less armor and used fabric for parts of its skin. Literal cloth, not metal, which sounds unbelievable now. Early on, it picked up some wins over the French Air Force, and Italian command convinced themselves they had a real competitor. In truth, the Falco was already behind the times. As soon as the British put it up against modern fighters, its weaknesses showed, and Italy pulled it from frontline duty. The Falco's era ended almost as quickly as it began. By 1941, Nazi Germany made its move into the Soviet Union, launching Operation Barbarossa. Hitler wanted to take Moscow fast, certain the Soviets would fold. Instead, he found himself in one of history's bloodiest battles. The Soviets scrambled to produce any aircraft it could, sometimes rushing models into service before they finished proper testing. One result was the Lavochkin-Gorbunov-Gudkov Lag-3. This plane, a mouthful even before anyone tried to fly it, looked good on a design sheet. In practice, the Lag-3 was slow, heavy, underpowered, and plagued by quality control problems. Factories cranked them out as quickly as possible, but that meant flaws in construction and performance. The Messerschmitts of the Luftwaffe had no problem ripping into the Lag-3's wooden fuselage, and the German planes outpaced and outclimbed the Soviet design in the air. Soviet pilots flew these under impossible conditions, but even they joked about what the name Lag really stood for. Lakirovani Garantirovani Grob, the varnished, guaranteed coffin. The reality of flying it made the nickname sting even more. After round of desperate upgrades and modifications, the Lag-3 finally gave way to the Lag-5. That new version finally delivered the kind of performance the Red Air Force needed, but the Lag-3 left behind a rough legacy, remembered as one of the most disappointing Soviet planes of the war.